Pay attention to these two people in this CCTV footage. The man, visibly agitated and pointing a handgun, is Vincent Calabrese, a 38-year-old auto mechanic. The woman arguing with him from the other end of the gun is Dr. Patricia Holloway, a respected 41-year-old cardiac surgeon. Little did she know, these were the final moments of her life. A couple of minutes later, right there in front of Patricia's house, the man with the gun would change the trajectory of both of their lives forever. At 7:07 a.m. on December 28, 1999, the San Diego Police Department's 911 dispatch center received a frantic call from the affluent neighborhood of La Jolla. A neighbor, her voice trembling with panic, reported hearing gunshots. Through her panicked breaths, she described seeing a woman lying motionless on a lawn. She also saw the shooter, a man who didn't run or speed away in a car. He simply turned and walked away from the scene with a calm, deliberate pace. Police units raced to the location, preparing for a dangerous manhunt in the quiet, winding streets. But the suspect wasn't hiding, and the pursuit they expected never happened. Instead, what they found waiting for them was somehow far more unsettling. Dr. Patricia Holloway was, by every public measure, a success. At 41 years old, she was a highly respected cardiothoracic surgeon at Mercy General Hospital, earning an annual salary of over $425,000. Her colleagues in the hospital's board praised her technical skill, pointing to a high success rate in complex, life-saving procedures. She had built a pristine reputation from a prestigious education at Johns Hopkins Medical School and a background rooted in an upper-middle-class family from Scottsdale, Arizona. Her life outside the hospital reflected this success. A $1.2 million home on Torrey Pines Road, a silver Mercedes E320, and a social calendar filled with the city's elite. Divorced with no children, her life was her career. However, beneath the polished surface was a well-documented professional flaw. Hospital records and patient reviews, which would later be scrutinized by investigators, revealed a distinct pattern in her behavior. While wealthy patients with private insurance received lengthy, attentive consultations, those with Medicare or other public assistance programs reported a different experience. They described Dr. Holloway as cold, dismissive, and impatient. Consultations were often cut short, questions were brushed aside with technical jargon, and a clear sense of irritation was noted by family members. This wasn't just a poor bedside manner, it was a consistent bias that separated her patients by wealth. Her world of precision and privilege was orderly and sterile, far removed from the lives of the working-class families who sometimes ended up in her care. In late 1998, that sterile world was about to collide with a family who had nothing but each other, when a referral for a 67-year-old widow named Rosa Calabrese landed on her desk. Vincent Calabrese's world revolved around his mother. At 38, Vinny was a quiet, hard-working auto mechanic who had already endured significant loss. After his wife died in a car accident years earlier, his 67-year-old mother, Rosa, became the sole focus of his life. Rosa, an Italian immigrant who had worked for 40 years as a seamstress, was a warm and resilient woman. When she was diagnosed with aortic valve stenosis in late 1998, Vinny dedicated himself entirely to her care. He researched doctors, attended every appointment, and did his best to translate the complex medical information for her. His only goal was to see her through the surgery that promised to save her life. On January 12, 1999, Vinny and Rosa sat in the polished waiting room of Dr. Patricia Holloway's office at Mercy General Hospital. According to Vinny's later statements, he watched Dr. Holloway spend nearly 45 minutes with a well-dressed couple before them, laughing and speaking warmly. When the Calabreses were finally called in, the atmosphere changed instantly. The consultation lasted only 11 minutes. Dr. Holloway barely made eye contact with Rosa, directing her highly technical explanations at Vinny. When Rosa tried to ask a question in her broken English, the surgeon appeared visibly irritated. Vinny's questions about risks were met with a curt, dismissive response. "It's routine." Before they could process what was happening, the meeting was over and a nurse was handing them consent forms. Vinny left that office with a growing sense of unease. He had witnessed a clear difference in the standard of care, a difference that seemed to be based on their appearance and insurance plan. He saw a doctor who viewed his mother not as a person, but as a low-priority procedure. But with the surgery scheduled and few other options available, he pushed his doubts aside and put his faith in the system. It was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life.
On the morning of March 15, 1999, Rosa Calabrese was admitted to Mercy General Hospital at 6:30 a.m. Vinnie stayed with her until she was taken to pre-op, reassuring her that everything would be fine. Dr. Holloway, meanwhile, arrived at the hospital nearly an hour and a half later, 30 minutes behind schedule. Hospital records later noted she had attended a charity gala the previous evening. The surgery began at 8:15 a.m. For the first hour, the procedure appeared to be routine. Then, at 9:52 a.m., the first critical error occurred. According to the subsequent malpractice investigation, Dr. Holloway miscalculated the prosthetic valve size. Instead of remeasuring, she forced the oversized valve into position. Shortly after, while suturing, her instrument nicked the left coronary artery. A severe but repairable mistake had it been noticed in time. It was not. At 10:34 a.m., alarms sounded in the operating room as Rosa's blood pressure plummeted. The surgical team discovered massive internal bleeding caused by the two unaddressed errors. Despite frantic attempts to repair the damage, it was too late. At 11:03 a.m., Rosa Calabrese was pronounced dead on the operating table. 30 minutes later, Dr. Holloway entered the family waiting room where Vinnie was sitting alone. The conversation, as Vinnie would later recount to investigators, lasted less than 2 minutes. The surgeon was clinical and showed no emotion. She stated that her mother's heart couldn't handle the procedure and that these things happen. She offered no apology, no details, and no comfort. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Vinnie alone in the silent waiting room to process the fact that his mother was gone. In the weeks following his mother's death, Vincent Calabrese was consumed by grief. His small apartment in Chula Vista became a silent memorial to the only family he had left. The isolation was shattered when a bill arrived from Mercy General Hospital for $87,600. Her mother's limited insurance covered less than half of it. Staring at the cold demand for payment for the procedure that killed her, Vinnie's grief began to harden into suspicion. He called Dr. Holloway's office 26 times over the next few weeks, requesting his mother's medical records and a chance to understand what went wrong. His calls were never returned. Frustrated and stonewalled, Vinnie used what little money he had to hire David Morse, an attorney specializing in medical malpractice. Morse immediately requested the complete unedited case file from the hospital, including the detailed operative report from Rosa's surgery. He then sent the entire file to Dr. Raymond Fisher, an independent cardiac surgeon with a reputation for giving blunt, unbiased reviews. For weeks, Vinnie waited, hoping for an answer that would either confirm his fears or allow him to finally let go. The answer arrived on May 14, 1999, in the form of Dr. Fisher's official report. The findings were not ambiguous, they were damning. Dr. Fisher stated in clear and unequivocal terms that the operative report showed clear indication of surgical error. He concluded that the valve sizing was inappropriate, the coronary artery injury suggested a lack of proper care, and that Rosa Calabrese's death was preventable. For Vinnie, this report was everything. It was the proof that his mother's death wasn't just an unfortunate accident, it was a fatal, inexcusable mistake. Armed with the expert's report, Vinnie's attorney filed a medical malpractice lawsuit against Dr. Holloway and Mercy General Hospital on June 3, 1999. The response was immediate and aggressive. Dr. Holloway's high-powered legal team filed a motion to dismiss, claiming Rosa's death was due to her own underlying health issues. Throughout the summer, Vinnie sat through depositions and hearings, watching as Dr. Holloway, in her expensive designer suits, showed no remorse. During her own deposition in August, she stated coldly that the procedure was performed to the standard of care and that the outcome, while unfortunate, was not expected. The legal system that Vinnie had put his faith in began to systematically dismantle his case. The hospital's lawyers buried him in paperwork and legal motions. In October, the case went to mediation, where the hospital offered a settlement of $75,000, an amount that would barely cover the medical and funeral bills. The offer was conditional. Vinnie had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and legally agreed that no wrongdoing had occurred. The final blow came on November 9th, when a judge dismissed the most critical parts of Dr. Fisher's expert testimony based on a legal technicality. Vinny's lawyer informed him that their chances of winning at trial had plummeted to less than 15%. Feeling defeated and financially drained, Vinny accepted the settlement on November 18th. After all the fees were paid, he was left with just $8,400. Dr. Holloway never attended the settlement meeting and never offered an apology. Vinny left the lawyer's office with a check in his pocket, but with no justice, no accountability, and no closure. The system had delivered its final, insulting verdict. The failed lawsuit was the breaking point. With no legal recourse left, Vincent Calabrese spiraled into a deep and isolating depression. He stopped going to work at the auto shop, and his small apartment became a dark room filled with his mother's photographs, stacks of legal documents, and newspaper clippings about medical malpractice. He stopped interacting with friends and spent his days consumed by a singular, burning obsession: Dr. Patricia Holloway. Her life, unlike his, had continued without interruption. Driven by a feeling of profound powerlessness, Vinny began driving his 1991 Ford F-150 to La Jolla. He would park for hours watching Dr. Holloway's expensive home from a distance. He saw her leave for the country club, return with shopping bags, and host dinner parties. To Vinny, every light on in her house was a symbol of the injustice he had suffered. He was watching a woman who had, in his eyes, taken a life without consequence, and the legal system had rewarded her for it. His grief curdled into a cold, methodical anger. On December 13, 1999, that anger took a concrete form. Vinny drove to a gun store in El Cajon called Patriot Arms. With no criminal history or mental health holds on his record, his background check cleared instantly. He legally purchased a Glock 17 9mm handgun and several boxes of ammunition, telling the clerk he wanted it for home protection. He left the store with the weapon in a box on his passenger seat. He was no longer just watching, he was now preparing. The purchase of the gun was the final turning point. In the week that followed, Vincent Calabrese's actions became methodical and precise. He took the Glock 17 to a shooting range in Santee on 2 separate occasions, familiarizing himself with the weight, recoil, and accuracy of the weapon. His surveillance of Dr. Holloway also intensified, shifting from aimless observation to data collection. He documented her daily schedule in a small notebook, noting that she went for a run at 6:45 a.m. every Tuesday and Thursday, that her housekeeper came on Mondays and Fridays, and that she was usually home from the hospital by 7:30 p.m. By December 27, 1999, his plan was fully formed. That evening, he sat at his kitchen table and wrote 2 letters. The first was a 14-page, detailed account of his mother's death, the failed lawsuit, and the systemic indifference that had pushed him to this point. He addressed it simply to whoever finds this. The second letter was shorter, written to the only person he felt would understand. It was a note to his mother, which he planned to leave at her grave. In it, he wrote, "Mama, I'm sorry, but I can't let her get away with what she did to you. She didn't care that you died. She didn't care about you at all. I have to make this right." He placed the letters on his table, his preparations now complete. He had the weapon, he had the knowledge of his target's routine, and he had written his final explanation. All that was left was to choose the day. On the morning of Tuesday, December 28, 1999, Vincent Calabrese parked his truck 3 blocks from Dr. Holloway's home and walked the remaining distance in the pre-dawn quiet, the Glock 17 concealed in his jacket. He waited. At 7:02 a.m., just as his notebook predicted, Dr. Holloway exited her home, dressed in running clothes. Vinny stepped out from behind a hedge to confront her. According to witness statements and Vinny's own confession, Holloway was initially annoyed, not recognizing him. When he identified himself as Rosa Calabrese's son, her annoyance turned to dismissiveness, telling him the matter was settled. That cold dismissal was the final trigger. As Dr. Holloway turned her back on him to start her run, a final act of disregard, Vinny pulled out the handgun. For the first time, she saw the weapon, and her irritation was replaced by terror. The neighbor's security camera footage captured the next 2 minutes. Dr. Holloway backing away, her hands raised, pleading for her life. Witnesses later reported hearing her offer him money, a final fatal miscalculation of the man she was facing. For Vinny, this was not about money. It was about a life that had been devalued. At 7:34 a.m., Vincent Calabrese fired 3 shots. 2 struck Dr. Holloway in the chest, and a third hit her in the abdomen. She collapsed on her front lawn. For a moment, Vinny stood over her body, his expression later described by a witness as simply empty. As a neighbor across the street screamed into a 911 call, he turned and walked, not ran, back the way he came, leaving the MUR-surgeon to die on the perfect green grass of the life she had built. While paramedics pronounced Dr. Holloway dead at 17:17 a.m., police located Vinny's truck just 3 blocks away. They found him sitting calmly in the driver's seat, the Glock 17 resting on the passenger seat. He surrendered without any resistance, putting his hands out the window before they could even issue a command. His first words to the arresting officers were direct and without emotion. "I did it. I killed her. She killed my mother, and nobody cared." For the lead homicide detectives, Sarah Mendoza and Robert Wong, the case seemed to be the simplest they had handled in years. They had video evidence, multiple eyewitnesses, a murder weapon, and a suspect who had already given a full confession. But that afternoon, Detective Mendoza executed a search warrant on Vinny's apartment, and the case began to change. On the kitchen table, she found the 14-page letter he had left behind. She sat in her car and read all of it. It was not the rambling manifesto of a madman. It was a methodical, heartbreakingly detailed account of his mother's death, the cold dismissal by the hospital, the failed lawsuit, and the crushing weight of a justice system that he felt had ignored him. Mendoza was a veteran detective who had seen countless motives for murder. But this was different. The letter didn't excuse the crime, but it explained it with a painful clarity. The open and shut case now had a deep and troubling context. The man in her custody was a killer. But as Mendoza finished the last page, she began to wonder if he was also a victim. Vincent Calabrese's trial in August 2000 captured the attention of San Diego, becoming a flashpoint for public debate on where justice truly lies. The prosecution painted the picture of a man who appointed himself judge, jury, and executioner, presenting a clear timeline of premeditation, the surveillance, the gun purchase, and the letters. In response, his public defender argued it was a case of voluntary manslaughter, telling the story of a grieving son pushed past his breaking point by a negligent doctor and a system that had utterly failed him. Evidence of Dr. Holloway's past malpractice settlements and the damning expert report on Rose's death were laid bare for the jury to see. Against his lawyer's advice, Vinny himself testified. He was honest and raw, admitting his crime was wrong but refusing to apologize for the anger that fueled it. "My mother died because a doctor didn't think she was important enough to care about," he told the silent courtroom. "I know I have to pay, but I want you to understand, my mother's life mattered." After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict that satisfied no one: guilty of second-degree murder. They acknowledged the emotional provocation but could not condone the act, sentencing him to 15 years to life in prison. In the years that followed, the case left a complicated and tragic legacy. Dr. Holloway's death triggered an internal review at Mercy General Hospital, which quietly revised its policies after 2 of her previous malpractice settlements were unsealed, revealing a pattern of negligence. The case itself became a local symbol of the deep flaws in healthcare and law, a chilling example of how easily individuals can be failed by the very institutions designed to protect them. Vincent Calabrese was a model prisoner. After being denied parole 3 times, he was finally released in November 2024 at 63 years old, having served nearly 25 years. He now volunteers at a legal aid clinic, helping families like his own navigate the same system that broke him,